Joining me in studio, Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone. Sheriff, welcome.
Thanks for having me, big man. It's good to see you in person.
Yeah, it's always good to talk with you. Really interested in this story about what happened, because I didn't even know, for all the stuff we talk about in law enforcement, I didn't realize how big this lawsuit was. But early on in COVID, if you can tell us the story, early on in COVID, was it the ACLU and another organization that sued the sheriff's office and wanted inmates released because of COVID danger, correct?
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving me the time, Mike, because what happens often is you'll see when lawsuits are levied against any governmental institution, our office, unfortunately, facing too many. And when it occurs, it gets a ton of attraction. And I feel like it paints this picture over the employees and their hard work and misrepresents the sacrifice they make. So when lawsuits, when we're on the upside of them, when the reputation of these men and women is defended because it shows that they've done nothing wrong, it's like crickets out there. So I really appreciate you giving me the time, because I owe it to the men and women in the organization to tout when they do great work. So yeah, it was in June of 2020, and this lawsuit was filed, and the premise was, the allegation was we were violating constitutional rights by not doing enough to ensure the safety of inmates when it came to their health and the threat of COVID. And the lawsuit basically, the effort was that we were going to be forced to release inmates if they fell into a category that was deemed to be that they were more at risk of getting COVID and potentially dying from it. And what wasn't taken into consideration was all the work that went in advance by our employees to keep them safe.
So what was some of that work that you had done? Because the judge validated your side of this, not once, but twice, right?
Yeah, there were two separate lawsuits that were kind of mimicked each other. And when you read what the judge wrote, it was impressive, because he took the time to really itemize everything that we had done to protect inmates. So, let's just kind of roll the clock back. When COVID was hitting in other parts of the world, we have this naivety like, oh, we'll be fine. It's not going to get us. But the world is international. So we were really progressive in doing things like acquiring masks and getting things to sanitize the cells and making sure that we had gloves. And it wasn't just for our own employees. It was for the inmates and everybody, so that the environment could be clean and that our employees could perform in a way that they could be, safe and healthy. We took steps to set up a design to quarantine people if they came through when we tested it, or to at least isolate, so we weren't passing that infection through the jails. And if someone was infected, they were moved into medical, care and taken care of. So this was from the very beginning. When everybody was unsure, we took the position that we're going to err on the side of overreacting to ensure the safety not only of the inmate population, but of our own employees. There are a lot of men and women that go to work every day facing the threat of violence, but the biological threat that they were facing at that time in a closed environment was considerable. So we wanted to be in front of it, and we were from Jump Street.
And it had to take a lot of buy-in from the employees as well, because very early on, we didn't know. I mean, even here in this area where we are, we had bleach spray because we heard it was on countertops, and other times it was masks, and nobody was sure at first what was going to work, and there were people that kind of pushed back, but it took a lot of buy-in.
Yeah, and listen, I'm sure those out there listening right now, they're going, well, this isn't all that sexy, Mike, why are we talking about this morning? It is important, and I'll tell you why it's important. My responsibilities as a sheriff when you elected me, first and foremost, is public safety, making sure the community is safe. The other part of it is accountability and transparency, but right behind that, or adjacent to it, is I have an obligation to protect the reputation of the men and women who are doing this difficult job, because they face so much criticism and scrutiny, it's not fair to them. So yeah, they were going to work every day, putting on masks for 8, 10, 12-hour shifts, and they were putting on gloves, and they were sanitizing, doing all these additional duties that weren't commonplace. And they did it with the right attitude that although it may not have been comfortable, they may not have agreed with it, they understood that the organization had to protect people and protect the reputation of the organization, because we could face a lawsuit like this if we didn't.
So what was it that the judge said, that when you read the judge's decision and what the judge had to say, what was it that kind of made you pump your fist in the air, like, thank goodness, now someone finally has said we did the right thing?
Well, the best way I could sum it up is, you could paraphrase it. He said we went above and beyond. We didn't just do what was necessary. We went to the extreme. And I have to, some people that I've spoken to are like, gosh, I'm not sure that you really want to represent what I'm about to share with you because it is so heavy. My understanding is there were 3 inmates that died of COVID during this time frame, right, in and out. We lost about 15 or 16 employees to COVID. So we literally lost more employees than we saw inmates go through there and die. And I'm not saying that one is, if I tout it the other way, then suddenly that makes it okay. You don't want to see any loss of life. But just take a moment to think about that. These detention officers knew that their own lives were at risk, yet they came to work every day and did the job to the best of their ability. And what made me most proud was when you read this lawsuit, the judge did not mince words. He stated clearly the sheriff's office, correctional health services, and county health did everything that was not only reasonable, but above and beyond to ensure that they met the expectations of the community in caring for the inmate population.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, and it has nothing to do with the jail system. It's the prison system. Judges are talking about medical care and making sure things change in our prison system. But you're saying in the jail system, this has been kind of business as usual for your office.
Yes, but imagine this. We have, so in any given day, there's going to be anywhere from 6,500 to 8,500 inmates in our jail system, about 100,000 every year. 250 to 300 every day are coming in and going out the door. So everything they're coming through the door with, they're bringing. If it's any type of infection, any type of issue, mental illness, drug addiction, and our detention officers and correctional health staff are expected to meet them where they are and care for them. And this is a population. Again, it's a criminal element, people accused of crimes, already difficult to manage in of itself. And in that environment, which you often hear is when there's a mishap, when there's somebody performs in a way that goes in conflict with our values, and that'll be exploited all day long. But what isn't exploited is the good work, and that's what I wanted to talk about today, so I appreciate you letting me come in and talk about it.
Let's shift gears. I know you've made some changes recently because of fentanyl and because of there was an accusation against one of your detention officers. So you have installed scanners to not only scan inmates, but also to scan employees for drugs and other paraphernalia, correct?
Yeah, we're in the final stages. They're being shipped now and implemented, and we're going to be staffing those up, not using our detention officers so that we don't deplete the workforce. But I just feel like if you're truly committed to a drug-free jail, which is it's not attainable, it's not realistic, but you can mitigate by being thoughtful and committed, that it has to be everybody. And it's not just our employees. There's a lot of other staff that come in. There are volunteers that come into the jail system. So everybody who might be considering bringing contraband, we should have a high standard to prevent that from happening.
To highlight this, unfortunately, 7 incarcerated people at the Estrella jail were hospitalized. And was it an overdose?
Yes. And the investigation is ongoing right now, so I'd like to tell you definitively what it was. I can presume fentanyl is the most likely culprit, but here's what needs to be explained. First and foremost, what happens in the jail is a reflection of what's going on in society. It just ends up being a little bit more exaggerated because our population are drug users and people involved in crime, so it's disproportionate, right? And people go, well, how does that happen? How do you get drugs in the jail? I am amazed of what inmates are willing to do to bring drugs in the jail. And you have to recognize there are inmates who know they're going in. It's not like you just got arrested on the street. It could be a probation violation. It could be that you've been sentenced and have to report. So they will put drugs in parts of their body where we are not permitted by law to access. And I'm sure you understand what I'm explaining. And when they can bring it in and they can distribute it, it's got high value. And fentanyl is so dangerous that this is the type of thing that we see. So we're doing everything possible. We even have our called a SWAT team. It's in the jails. I call it SRT, a special response team. They will hit pods just randomly, very aggressively, and do searches. We have upped the volume of searches that we're doing, and we try to conduct very thorough reviews of inmates coming through to try to get the drugs out of them before they can get inside the jail.
One of the most successful things for CBP is they use the dogs that are so well trained, that have such high senses that they can smell the drugs. Do you employ that? Is that something, or is that just such an expensive proposition?
No, we're actually looking into it right now. I spoke with my chief last week because we're going to take every possible step, because it's not just the inmate population, it is the detention officers who are at risk when you're dealing with this issue. So we're going to consider everything and anything because we want to make sure that we run a jail system where we can keep everybody safe, including our DOs, and this is the biggest threat to us right now. There's even interesting ways, Mike, that you wouldn't imagine that, so I'll give you an example. When it comes to correspondences that go into the jail inmates, if it comes from an attorney that has protected communication, so the folks that work in our jail crimes area that review the mail coming in, they do their best to review everything, make sure that people aren't mailing drugs in. But inmates will take paper. First they'll take an envelope that came from a legitimate legal correspondence, send that envelope back out, have a family member or friend get a piece of paper, write on there as though it's a legal communication. They will dilute fentanyl in water, dip that piece of paper in the water, let it dry up on the piece of paper, and then send it back into the jail. And they'll tear pieces of paper off and sell it to the inmate population because it's basically paper with fentanyl on it and get them high. So that's what these men and women are challenged with in the jail system. And it is incredible the work that they do. But yeah, we have these setbacks like this. But the numbers are reflective of society.
I appreciate the time as always. It's good to talk with you. Time just goes by so quickly, but we appreciate the time today. I hope you'll come back once the machines are in place. I'd like to hear how it's going.
Absolutely. We'll come bring you through a tour and take a look at the inside out.
That would be cool. I would love to do
Absolutely.
that. All right. That's Sheriff Paul Penzone, Maricopa County Sheriff. Just an update on what's happening in the jail system. And it's not just the deputies on the street. There's a lot of law enforcement that goes inside the jails as well. We'll be back here in just a few.